Hello. Hello. Can everyone hear me at the back there? Good. Excellent. I shall start with an apology. I haven't spoken to this number of people, actually, since it was my best friend's wedding. But I shall start with a bit of an apology. I only got back from a holiday in Africa early hours of yesterday morning, so my slides are nowhere near as slick and professional as the ones you've just seen from Google. They're very basic, but hopefully the story will add a little bit of colour to what we're talking about here. So, a little bit about EACT, and I'm not going to dwell on this for very long because we're not advertising or anything, but we're a multi-sponsor, so we sponsor academies. We were established about 3 years ago. We've got 17 academies around the country, from Leeds down to Dartmouth. Most of our academies I would describe as challenging, I think is the phrase I would use. They are schools that have generally had a troubled background. We've got about 2,150 staff, and 11,000 students, which is not bad when you think 3 years ago we had nothing. And we've grown, on average, in terms of attainment of about 10% over the last 2 years, based in London. So that's who we are. I'm the Director of ICT for EACT. So it may have been a bit of a strange title for the presentation. You thought, what's 100% at web? Well, I will explain. We've got one of our schools, which is St Ursula's Primary School in Bristol. And this was a school that had a troubled background. So it's a former convent school, which then went to become a private school and then went bust. There'd been a lack of ICT investment for about 3 years, no money coming in, very, very poor infrastructure, 10-year-old PCs, these sort of things, very limited funding. They only had 60 students. This is a proper primary school with 60 students in it, so they didn't have the money to do very much. And we owed something to the students. How could we give them a quality education and give them a quality experience in ICT in that situation where they were, sort of in a really, really bad place? So we had a chat to our friends in Google here and came up with the idea for a pilot. And as far as I know, I don't think anyone's done anything quite like this on the scale that we've done it. And the concept was a server-free school. So what do I mean by that? I'm talking about a school which literally just has a wireless connection, wireless network with an internet connection and nothing else. No PCs and no servers, but what they did use instead were the Chromebooks, and you've probably seen these if you've been wandering around, which look like laptops, but they're thin clients in effect. They're web thin clients. So everything has to sit outside of the school. There's nothing in the school. There's no servers. There's no software within the school. Which is quite an unusual model. And we weren't sure even if it was going to work. We thought, well, no one's done this before. There's going to be lots of risks. How's it going to work? So we put a plan together, and I sat down really and made a list up of the sort of things I'd expect to see in a primary school. So what sort of software will a primary school have? What sort of services will they have? How does that compare to what's available either from Google Apps, which obviously is free in the education world, or from freely available services that are out there? And the thing that surprised me when I made this table is every single one of the things where we said, right, okay, library system. Well, there's a web-based library system. MIS system, there's several of those actually. Photoshop equivalent, yep, there's lots of those as well. And we have yet to find anything that there isn't an equivalent of in the internet or the cloud world. So armed with that, and we looked at the costs of that, because then when you start looking at the costs and you think, no servers, so we don't have to spend money on those. We don't have to pay for license fees, apart from those services that we buy in over the web. Very low support costs, very low maintenance costs. And all of a sudden, it looked quite feasible. So we went ahead with it and said, right, we're going to pilot it. So in October, so it's still relatively fresh, but in October we went ahead and put this in. I say put it in, it's one of the quickest, easiest implementations I've ever seen, because anyone who's worked in the IT world for any length of time will know when you're putting servers and networks and wiring and software, all sorts of things will go wrong inevitably. This was very simple. It was just an internet connection and a wireless network. That's it. So it worked straight away. So the implementation took 1 to 2 weeks. That's all it took to actually get it sorted, and most of that was actually the wiring, to be honest, because we rewired. Everything we had was met by the web and cloud services. Since then, we've had very, very few snagging issues. I was expecting all sorts of problems, and when we entered this project, we thought, right, people are going to get stuck. We're going to have serious problems with the staff because they're not going to adjust to this new way of working. They'd spent all their lives working with Microsoft Office, and there's nothing wrong with Microsoft Office, but it's what they were used to. Amazingly, we had no issues whatsoever. It just went really smoothly. In fact, they loved it. They loved the Chromebooks, and they just got on with it. And we went back just before Christmas and said to them, right, tell us how bad it is then. Where are the real problems? And yes, there were some issues, and I'm not going to say it was all perfect, because it wasn't, and I'd be foolish to say so. But where there were issues was just where people were bumping up against the limits of the technology and saying, I want to do this specific thing or this advanced feature, and I can't quite work out how to do it. Now, in some cases, it was training. In some cases, we needed to go and acquire another service or a plug-in to what we had already. But there was no showstoppers there. I was expecting to go, no, nothing works, and we can't register the kids, and I can't do mail shots. But no, it all worked fine. We also did printing using Google Cloud Print, which was quite interesting as well. So we went away from the idea of having a print server. We just have Google-enabled or cloud-enabled printers which sit on the back of the network. So very, very interesting, very interesting. The important thing as well, in terms of actually use in the classroom, the kids love it. These devices have got little cameras built in, and both the teachers and the students have been using it to capture blogs, so they've been capturing video stuff and editing it, putting stuff into YouTube. And they're also exploring new ways of collaborating, because one of the things with conventional software, if you're using Office software, it is a bit rigid, and it's not really geared for sort of collaboration, because everything is local to your machine. One of the things about this, it all sits in the cloud, of course. So what you start finding is then you get children working on the same document or on the same presentation or on the same spreadsheet, and then they start sharing and collaborating. And they can do that with Google Apps because they can work on the same document at the same time, send messages to each other, and get that collaboration going. And they don't even have to be in the school because, of course, everything that's on here is also accessible when they go home, because the hardware really is incidental. It's just a means of getting them on. Everything's actually sat in the cloud. So that we're still exploring, and I've no doubt that we're going to find new ways of working, learning, teaching using this. But it's very, very early days. I mean, we only started this in October, and it's only January now. But already we're starting to see sort of things bubbling up, which is really interesting. So next steps, and this is my last slide. I said I'd keep it simple, and it is the most boring slide presentation you've ever seen. But the next steps, we're still underway with the pilot, but to be honest, I'm not even referring to it as a pilot anymore because it just works. It's just, it's in and it's running, and that's absolutely fine. I think a key message I would give, and this is something because we did get temptation both from within the school and from some of my colleagues and even myself to try and start bringing servers and PCs and things back in. But what we found with that is that it starts to break down when you start doing that, because then people start reverting back and you end up with two different systems and Active Directory and all that sort of gubbins. We've actually found by sticking to our guns and keeping the model quite pure as such and making it totally cloud-based, it actually works because it forces people to think a different way and use the tools in different ways. And that's actually been quite good because then they've discovered other things, ways to use the services. So we're aiming to have a second server-free school this year. We've got a free school which is opening in September, and on the back of this, what I want to do is recreate it. It's very low cost. In terms of the cost of actually putting this in, we normally would work on the basis of, up to £800 per student for putting in a brand new school and equipping them and getting all the software and putting on all the PCs. This is if you're starting from nothing. We did this for just over half that. So in terms of starting from nothing to equip the whole school, put in all the printers, and remember, no license fees. Very low support costs. We've got an extended warranty on the equipment, so if it breaks, we just send it back, and we've got a pile of spares, and they can just plug in, log on, and they're back to where they were. So the ongoing costs are quite low, to say the least, which for them was very attractive because, like I said, they've got relatively small pupil numbers at the moment, so they can't afford lots and lots of expense. And we are now considering its use in secondary academies. When I started this process, I said, it's never going to work in a secondary. It's not going to work. But actually, having done this now, I think it would. It wouldn't work universally, and I'm not silly enough to say that, because you couldn't do CAD and some of the more advanced stuff on there, and clearly you still have to have some more sort of horsepower, if you like. But for day-to-day general computing, for delivering stuff into the classroom, for students to use, I'd have no qualms about putting it into a secondary school, and we're thinking of doing so ourselves at the moment. And the final thing really is just to say, and what I'll finish on, is we're very keen to share best practice. We've learned a lot along the way. I'm very happy to share that with anyone who's interested. But equally, if there are communities out there who are starting to use the Google Apps or want to go more cloudy and want to compare notes with us, we're keen to do that, because what I'd like to get is a nucleus of schools working together and saying, oh, have you tried this, and get them working, which is one of the reasons why we're aiming to have a second school later this year, so at least we can do it internally, but equally we'd like to network outside of that as well. So that's it, that's my presentation. Just really any questions from anyone? Lovely. I've stunned you into submission. Well, come and see me afterwards if you want to have a chat about anything. Thanks very much.